So I've been really drawn to Jesus' parables lately. I'm fascinated and challenged by the way that these parables take the typical order that we usually pattern our lives in and just flips it. In this parable, we see this sower who goes out to sow, and he takes these valuable seeds whose placement and growth would determine his livelihood. And going out, he just scatters them all over the place. And to most practical people, this sower might kind of seem like an idiot. Seeds are valuable. Seeds are food, and if this is a farmer, seeds are also his business. His return for his crop is important, and it's a key calculation. Some sower may pore over ways to incorporate the latest technology to get the maximum yield, the best bang for your buck. And it's probably not some GPS-driven John Deere tractor, but maybe it was a plow with a really sweet wedge on it. But this sower doesn't seem to think about maximizing a profit. The sower just throws seeds all over the place, many of them never germinating well. But the harvest reaped is strong all the same. It's enough beyond his wildest dreams. Perhaps the sower thinks that any soil is potentially good soil. Perhaps the sower thinks that this harvest may be greater and more expansive than he can quite envision. With all these different kinds of soil named in the story, it might make sense to call this the parable of all the different kinds of soil. But I really see it as the parable of the sower, because the parables, the way Jesus tells them, there's always something that's a little bit at a slant, something that's different than the way we usually do things. And in this, the soil's still all the same. It still acts the way you'd think soil would. But the sower is the weird piece. The sower is what's different. And that, I think, tells us something about the nature of the one who sows everywhere, whether it looks really promising or whether it doesn't. And then this wild harvest still comes up. In the parables, Jesus uses these familiar moments of people's lives, things like hiring laborers, or family dynamics, or farming. But it's like they're happening in these alternative realities. So this laborer in a parable wants to hire, or this landowner wants to hire laborers for the day, and they are paid the same for a minute of work or a whole day of work. Or this father welcomes back the son who has squandered all of his inheritance with a lavish party. Or a sower goes out to sow and throws the seeds everywhere as though it really doesn't matter where they land. And I love it that when people ask Jesus, what is the kingdom of heaven like that you keep talking about? He tells them stories of their own lives. In the parables, Jesus uses the daily stuff of life to show us that God just doesn't go in for the same value system that we do. The way he told these stories actually may have wound up keeping this message of power looking different out of prison, because it was like a coded language where those who listened to it at face value were probably confused and thought, this guy's a dolt, he doesn't know anything about farming. But to those who listened with their hearts, they could hear the radical message of grace in that story. Jesus' parables call us to listen with our hearts rather than with our minds. And in describing why he speaks in stories, he says that he does it to open hearts that have grown dull and insensitive. There is this message of grace that's so loud sometimes, but I wonder if our hearts get dull and make us unable to really hear what Jesus calls us to do. And then justice winds up looking less like mercy and like this mathematical sort of calculation of trying to make sure things are even and balanced and the give and take is correct. And it seems like lately this is particularly bad, this mathematical calculation. Israel and Gaza are breathtakingly annihilating each other. Corporations are being granted stronger rights than the people who work for them, and children are fleeing the threat of certain violence in their homelands, come hundreds of miles to the United States, and we say, "You're not welcome here. There isn't enough. Go home." It seems like people are acting out of this sense that one person's justice comes at the expense of another, that for one person to win, another has to lose. When I see this, it makes me feel angry and so deeply sad. But then I look at the parables and the way Jesus uses them, and I see this world, this logic that they create. And there's a vision of a realm in which our calculations of justice and worth are just shattered. In these parables, we see God's justice, and it is the opposite of the way that our world so often works. It is extravagant, it is unending, and it is full of mercy and grace. God is not just or merciful. God's justice is mercy, and it is the gift of grace. And it may not always feel like there's abundance, but like the way manna falls on the Israelites in the wilderness, it's enough. God's world is one in which we have grace for each other, and that we don't lose just because others win, but everyone has what they need. Jesus revealed that in God's world, there is enough love and bread and fish and money and forgiveness and healing for everyone. God's justice is so wide that it encompasses grace that is enough as a part of its basic logic. So how can we be extravagant sowers? If someone had probably asked Jesus that, he might tell them a story of their own lives. Thinking of a story like this, I thought of my own story that's wrapped up in this church and in this community. So, like Jesus said, what do you make of this? There was a church, and they committed themselves to being a teaching congregation. And many students were invited over the years to learn and grow with the church and its people. And they may yield different results. These relationships may be pleasant, they may be thorny, but they're worth the investment, because the yield of producing a wide variety of successful ministries is as much the point of the formation of that church, who cared enough to invest in those people and to grow them. This church, made up of individuals with their own passions and dreams and hopes and agendas, can support those looking to vision together how they will love God and others. And so maybe this story isn't about measurably successful yields like that sower, but the story is that church and the practice of mentoring, loving, and can invite experiencing together. Here there is a heart for grace and investment without expectation of reciprocation, but rather a hope that begets more hope and imagines a new and grace-filled world. In living into that world, we as a church will take an offering next Sunday to support the children fleeing the danger in their home in Central America. And as Pat mentioned, this Wednesday we will meet together to figure out how we can respond and offer mercy and grace in the midst of this humanitarian crisis. Let us be that church that lives into the realm where there is enough love and bread and grace and mercy. We are called to listen and act with our hearts so that grace might sprout up. A sower went out to sow and did it extravagantly. And it landed everywhere, on all sorts of earth. And not everything took root, but the garden that sprang up was enough. Amen.